Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Beta Change Minisode. It is National Diabetes Week in Australia. So today I have with me Ashley and Lou, and they're going to talk to us about National Diabetes Week in Australia and the themes of this year's National Diabetes Week, which are the 4 T's of type 1 diabetes, as you can see on your screen. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that and about Diabetes Victoria and their mission for National Diabetes Week in Australia, and talk a little bit about diagnosis of diabetes as well. So welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to talk with you both today. So can you guys introduce yourself really quick again? Ashley, as you know, is a co-founder of Beta Change, and Lou is a new guest that we have. So we're so excited to have you both.
Thanks, Katie. So as you know, I'm one of the co-founders of Beta Change, and I live with a slightly different type of diabetes. Technically, it's been classified as type 1B, but the diagnosis has been tricky. So I thought it would be fantastic today to have Lou on the show. So Lou, I'll let you introduce myself.
Yep, so I'm Lou, and I have type 2 diabetes.
So Lou is a huge advocate for young adults with type 2 diabetes. So she underplays that very much, but she's a huge advocate for that. And that's why we're so excited to have her on the show today.
Well, it's awesome. I was actually going to ask you, Lou, what is it that you do when you're not appearing on Minisodes to talk about National Diabetes Week?
So I work in hospitality. Yeah.
And so what kind of advocacy projects do you work on?
So I'm on the advisory committee for Diabetes Victoria.
But also she's one of the moderators of our young adults with type 2 Facebook support groups. So she does a lot of things. She just doesn't say them all the time.
She quietly do it.
She's a little ninja advocate.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. I like ninja advocate. I think that's awesome. Well, again, thank you both for talking with us and for playing with Ashley's cat today while we were setting up this minisode. Hopefully she'll make a guest appearance later. But can we start off by talking a little bit about both of your diagnoses with type 1B and type 2 diabetes? Because I think that type 1 diagnoses are something that we talk a lot about, and that's obviously the focus of this year's National Diabetes Week for Diabetes Australia. So I'd like to hear about your experiences with being diagnosed. And I have type 1 myself, so I have my own diagnosis story about that. But I think, it's really interesting to just hear about other people's experiences with, very similar things. And sometimes people can experience way different things related to diabetes. So whoever wants to go first.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that ties in really well with National Diabetes Week this year. And the campaign for Diabetes Australia is obviously knowing the symptoms of type 1 diabetes, which is also quite similar to symptoms of type 2 diabetes. So that's the 4 T's. That's thirst, being tired, thinner, and toilet. So going to the toilet a lot more. And I guess for me, it was interesting because I didn't think I had those symptoms. My only symptom was being really sick with a sinus infection, which required a lot of antibiotics. And it was only after that my doctor was like, maybe we should just get a blood test to see if there's anything happening. And that was only by chance that we found out that I had diabetes, and they thought it was type 2 because I obviously haven't had a DKA or anything like that. So that's when I got everyone really confused about my diabetes. But I think your story was also quite different.
Yeah,
too.
so I didn't think that I had diabetes, I suppose, and it was a ex-partner of mine that was like, you need to go and get tested. I think you've got diabetes. I had sort of all the classic symptoms, I suppose. So I was drinking a lot of water, going to the toilet a lot, eating a lot of food, but not feeling like it was doing anything in my body. And I also had numb toes, not that I realized that until I started on medication and the numb toes went away. So I went to my doctor and was talking to the doctor and, did the tests, and then they came back, oh, you've got diabetes. And I was like, oh, I want a second opinion. I sort of went straight into denial about having diabetes or type 2 diabetes. So yeah, that's sort of where mine went.
Yeah.
No,
I guess
I haven't heard that actually.
Yeah, and I just assumed that it was from work shoes that were, you know, not probably what I should have been wearing. And then afterwards I was like, oh, my toes aren't numb anymore, and I hadn't made that connection, I suppose. Yeah.
Wow, sorry, Ashley, what were you going to say?
I have completely forgotten, so don't worry about it.
That's fine. My own diabetes diagnosis was really similar to the 4 Ts. I had a virus and it kind of never went away. Like I was, you know, feeling terrible, but I was also like losing a lot of weight, drinking a lot, not able to keep food down after a while. And it's really interesting how everybody their bodies like react differently to not producing insulin or not using it effectively. You know, something as simple as a sinus infection, right, Ash? Like it can seem like, you know, we should be able to handle that. Like, so yeah, I find that, you know, you can have variations of the same theme almost with symptoms.
Yeah, it's also, I think, interesting that a lot of the doctors don't immediately think of diabetes. Like they always say, oh, it's just a virus, it'll go away, or, you know, it's just something minor, your body will handle it, or they'll just give you antibiotics and say, you know, go away and stuff. But I think that's the danger, particularly with type 1, as I was saying before, that, you know, if left undiagnosed, then you could really end up in hospital being quite sick. And, you know, for people with type 2, like we just feel terrible all the time. But it's just being such a common, I guess, condition now, you'd think that doctors and GPs would know a little bit more about it, or just be more aware of it, I think. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Lou.
I suppose for me, once I got the diagnosis, and then obviously, you know, you have all those appointments, none of the healthcare professionals actually believed that I had type 2 diabetes. They all thought that I had type 1, because, you know, I was 27. I wasn't that overweight. I didn't fit into the typical type 2 sort of box. And so they, you know, and even now if I go to the doctors and it's a new doctor, they often say, oh, are you sure you've got type 2? And I'm like, yes, I'm sure I've got type 2. And it's that constant sort of conversation with doctors about that. Yeah.
And that's something I think, even though the conversation about, you know, correct diagnoses and quicker diagnoses is really popular. I know, for example, Beyond Type 1 is doing their Bike Beyond campaign right now, and they are biking across the United States, and all of their support vehicles have the warning signs of type 1 printed on them so that, you know, people can become more familiar as they see this trailer driving down the side of the road. But I think that we don't often talk about the misunderstanding that goes on in the medical community, as you mentioned. You know, that's something that, you know, if there's still disagreement or still, you know, debate over what kind of diabetes you have, like Ashley said, with her diagnosis, or even with you, right? And people are like, are you sure? And, you know, they're the ones who, right, we trust to know.
Yeah. And then there's sort of that stigma, I guess, that comes from not all healthcare professionals or, you know, the general public, but there is that perception that, oh, you know, you're too young to have diabetes, or, you know, you're too young to have type 2 particularly, and then the whole public perceptions of, you know, you've done this to yourself, and that's quite painful as well. And this also kind of ties into what Diabetes Victoria are trying to highlight, is that Diabetes Victoria, I mean, that diabetes is an invisible condition. So you don't really know who has diabetes or who doesn't. And I think those comments that come up can be quite hurtful. And I don't know if you've had experiences with that.
I suppose the one that sticks in my mind the most is when I first went to see my diabetes educator. And he said to me, but you don't occupy 2 chairs. I don't think you can have type 2. And I was like, oh, okay. That's like a really full-on assumption, I suppose, to make about someone, just based on how they look. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the extreme, I suppose, for me.
Yeah. Katie, have you had any of those experiences as well?
You know, I was talking to this with Lisa, who we recently did a minisode with about psychology and diabetes. And I think that's something that makes it hard when you have those kinds of experiences with a diabetes team or any doctor really who isn't trained in diabetes, to hear comments like that. And yeah, I remember I had one ear, nose, and throat doctor that I went to for a sinus infection. And I think because of the sinus infection, my blood sugar had been running high. And this particular doctor said to me, well, why don't you just take more insulin if it's running?
Yeah, that's all we can do. Just take insulin.
Yeah. And so that's something that actually like still really bothers me, or things like that, because I think, for a lot of us, like those moments where we don't feel supported or we don't feel understood, they stick out more than the times where we're told we're doing a good job or we're told we're given positive feedback. It's like you think about those negative things more often. I don't know, maybe you guys feel differently, but I feel like they have a strong effect. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, they do. And I suppose when you're first newly diagnosed, you might think that that's normal and you don't sort of understand about being proactive in your own healthcare and how important it is. Like, you're actually part of that because you're not made to feel like you're part of that.
Yeah.
To begin with.
Yeah. And I think for me, the turning point was actually taking part in those AusDoc tweet chats that I said before, that has really opened my eyes to be, and I just connecting with other people with diabetes, that, you have to be your own advocate for your own healthcare. And that was something that I had never thought was done, because I just followed what was being told by the doctors. And I think that's also how you fell into advocacy a lot as well.
Because it's empowering to be part of your own sort of health care and important.
So how do you guys do that? How do you become part of your own healthcare? What are some ways that you try to do that, or that you try to encourage other people to do that?
I'm fussy about who I let into my healthcare team. And I shop around for what I need and what works for me. I don't just go, okay, this is the person I'm seeing. Yeah.
I think you kind of have to, and you have that right to find a healthcare professional that works for you and works with you, because everyone works in a different way. So not every healthcare professional will be suited to your needs, or, you won't get along with them necessarily. And, I know I remember talking about this as I was going through my dietetics training, is that don't take personal offense to that, because everyone has a different way of coping with things and learning about different things. So it's really about us finding our own healthcare team and what works for us. And we've said that a lot, I think, to other newly diagnosed people as well. That's so, so important.
And actually, it's so interesting that you say that, because like, I know I'm the type of person that I never want to hurt anyone's feelings. And I feel that it makes it hard for me to make those choices like Lou that are doing what's right for me and for my care, because I'm like, I have a relationship with this person and I don't want to like tell them I'm not going to see them anymore. Bye. And it's terrible, and because you feel like bad about it. And I'm just wondering, from a provider's point of view, what is that like, or what is your training in that? And, does it really not hurt your feelings, or like, what is the secret thing?
Like, it feels like cheating on your hairdresser. I think that's another thing you can sort of relate to, is that you have one hairdresser and you try not to stray from that. But this isn't touched on as much in our studies. It's something that you sort of have to learn to deal with along the way, because it is such a big part of healthcare that people come through all the time. And if you're working in a public sector, that's even harder, because it's very rare that you get to see the same people twice. So working in a place, in a position where you can see the same people over and over again, like, I think that's a privilege. And, it's just, you just have to break it to them nicely and say, I really appreciate your help, but I just need to find someone that works for me and works with me, kind of thing. And, you just have to learn to develop a thick skin over time and not let it worry you too much, I think, both as a patient and as a healthcare professional as well. Yeah.
Lou, can you talk a little bit about how you break up with healthcare professionals, and then when
I just don't go back? I don't think I've ever broken up with one.
It's over. It's not you. It's
no.
me.
When I first saw the endocrinologist that I see now, though, he was talking about how it was important for me to find the fit that was right for me. He had someone standing in for him that I didn't particularly like, and like how she handled things. And he was saying, you know, not everyone's going to fit into the same sort of relationship that you might have with one endo isn't going to be the same with the next. And you need to find the fit that's right for you. So I don't think I've ever been like, I'm not coming back. I just may not have, you know, made another appointment with that healthcare professional.
So you ghost them.
You ghost them, yeah, pretty much.
I've never thought of that in that way before, but yeah.
And I'm still ashamed to go back to the hairdresser that I left. Like, I'm so embarrassed. I was like, I'm so sorry. It's not you. I just...
Yeah. I think it's normal way, right? And they have other people that come see them, so it's not as if you're the one and only patient, right? Like, you're part of their business, and if it doesn't work, it's a relationship, but it's also about you. And I think, you know, that's something that can be hard is the focus on ourselves. I find that hard sometimes. And I'm like, oh, this is about me, but I'm like, I don't really want it to be about me though, because too much scrutiny there. That's gonna, you know, I don't know. I find that interesting. Do you guys ever have a hard time with, you know, talking about diabetes and like what you're going through on that national scale and sharing stories like this with OzDoc, the tweet chat and everything like that? Or is it something that kind of comes naturally to you?
It depends. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I normally hide away for National Diabetes Week, to be honest, and I don't sort of interact at all.
Why is that?
Because the stigma's attached to it.
Stigma, yeah. And I think that can be quite hard, you know, because when you put yourself out there, when you share your story, it gets heard by so many people, and you get all sorts of people because that makes the world go around. And some people can be very supportive, but other times you have some people that are like, you know what, you can't just cure your diabetes if you just work hard and exercise and eat right. And it's like, well, if that were the case, then, you know, I would have done that by now, kind of thing. And so I think particularly around like National Diabetes Week and, you know, major diabetes events, it's really important for us to consider and keep in mind being compassionate to other people as well, because it takes a lot of guts to share your story, I think. And that needs some sort of recognition and acknowledgement that it's not easy. Thanks for sharing your story, and that everyone has a different opinion.
Or a different journey to be had within having diabetes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything that you absolutely won't talk about, or do you have like kind of boundaries that you have to set when you're engaging in these kind of conversations with other people?
What was the question again?
do you have any boundaries you set when you talk about advocacy?
Do you think about that when you're engaging with maybe strangers?
I'm aware of other people's opinions and not necessarily what they might think, but from a type 2 perspective, sometimes that there's not the understanding there, or that what I'm talking about might be perceived as being trivial.
Yeah.
When it's not trivial to me, but in the scheme of things, it might be perceived as being trivial.
Yeah. So kind of like overthinking what other people are thinking.
Yeah, and then not participating because of that.
Yeah.
Or sort of holding back a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have those same moments as well. I'm like, you know, I don't think this is a big issue, but, you know, I'm scared of what other people might think, and so maybe I won't say that. But I think for me, my boundaries, and I think this is slowly lapsing over the years, is sort of mental health. Like I've been quite worried to talk about mental health because I think there is also a stigma around that. Particularly being, you know, a healthcare professional as well. I feel that might come back and haunt me, but I've only had really good support from talking about my experiences with, you know, seeking out help and counselling and things like that. So I think that's been good, and I'm still trying to find my way around there. But yeah, I think that would have been my boundary from a few years ago. Yeah. What about you, Katie?
Well, I was going to say the name of this minisode could be changed to Katie interpreting everything as a millennial, because you guys basically put a filter on it, right? Like you'll be like, I'm going to frame this way, or I'm going to address a certain issue in a different way, right? So yeah, I agree with what Lou said. You know, I think that there are times when I choose. I think that generally I'm really careful about what channels I choose to discuss certain things. And I feel like I sometimes want to use my social media network to have private conversations with people more often. And I think it can be really good for that, because that's just something where, I don't know, I think it depends on how you use social media and your life and what you want to be public. And I think aligning myself with organizations like, for example, Beta Change, that allow me to kind of use what I do to reach other people or to share stories that way. But yeah, I think like sometimes I don't necessarily want to be in a tweet chat, or I'd rather just, for example, find a cool person on Twitter and then like message them and be like, oh, like you live in New York, I live in New York, we should hang out and like talk about diabetes sometime, which might be weird, but like, I don't see it that way. I think it's however you choose to use it. And I think that it's really great that there are so many options for.
I think that's something I learned along the way, is that not everyone with diabetes is your instant best friend. Because initially I was so, I think, isolated that everyone I met was just, oh my God, you have diabetes, let's be best friends. But it's also about thinking, if this person didn't have diabetes, would I still be friends with them? Yeah, or, like Lou and I still talk from time to time. We check in like, how you going?
Yeah.
So I think that's really special, that diabetes does connect us, but it doesn't define that relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there are cool people. For example, I'm sure that's not the only reason you and Lou are friends.
No, we have other reasons. Yeah. It's not enough. Yeah. Exactly.
Right. How we all are connected, but I think it is interesting how people can connect in such a an interesting way by sharing their story, and you can maybe develop like friendships with people, and you can maybe, meet more people and expand your network of support a little bit. Or you can just know better by reading tweets.
But sometimes the best people to get advice from are actually other people living with diabetes.
Yeah.
Because they understand what you're going through, and they can go, oh yeah, I had that experience. Or actually, you know what, Lou, that experience isn't okay to be had, and you deserve to have better healthcare professionals. That's happened to me.
Yeah.
A fair bit.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah, and we always say that you can be taken by surprise, I think, by how supportive people are and how strong that community is. Have you guys ever been like pleasantly surprised by the diabetes community in Australia, or maybe the international diabetes community? Like when you felt like you needed help and you got it?
I suppose when you change people's perspectives, I suppose, on what they might have thought is like not necessarily typical, but just I can't think of the word. Like they go, oh, you have type 2. Oh, that's not, okay, that's changed my perception on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
on what it's all about and how you deal with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's quite special, because you're sort of changing the way they view things. Yeah. And I think as long as you can change one person's perspective and, reduce that stigma and judgment a little bit, that makes all the difference. And I've found that that's very rewarding. But they don't necessarily come up to you and say, oh, you've changed my perspective on like type 2 or whatever. But it's good.
So what are some ways you can tell that you've maybe changed someone's perspective? Or have you ever had like a bad diabetes joke moment? Like, how sometimes when your friends like make fun of you, it's fine. But when other people will make like the donuts joke, where like people have donuts and they'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry, you can't have any of these donuts. And you're like, yeah, actually, I'm going to take a donut. Do you ever have like times like that where you educate people that way? That you like maybe a guilty pleasure kind of thing?
Well, I think for me, it's seeing the people who used to say those negative comments turn around and educate someone else about like living with type 2, and you're like, oh my God, like that person has changed their perspective, and I think that's really exciting and one of the most rewarding things, because it's like, oh, they have either like changed their mind or they're pretending, but you kind of hope for the best. So I think that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
So tell me about National Diabetes Week in Australia, and how do you think that changes people's perspective? Or do you guys in your real life see those changes that you want to see in either awareness or general support around diabetes? Is that something that this week actually does for you?
That's a big question. I think from the national campaign where we're trying to highlight the symptoms of type 1 and type 2 diabetes, as long as it gets through to more healthcare professionals and one person gets diagnosed from it, on time and gets timely treatment and management, I think that's a success. Yeah. And then in terms of viewing diabetes as an invisible condition, I just hope that generates more kindness and more compassion from others. So I think that would be quite special. I'm sorry, my cat's running around everywhere.
You're distracted by this.
Yeah.
How about you, Lou? What do you think?
I suppose I wouldn't have been aware. So if I didn't have diabetes, I wouldn't have been aware of what the symptoms were. And I think it's important for those to be out there so that people can maybe identify them and pick them up. That's really important.
Yeah, I agree. And especially like we said, with regard to all kinds of diabetes. So, type 1, of course. But yeah, like you guys didn't think you had diabetes when you were diagnosed, right?
Yeah.
No one does, probably. No one.
It's sort of like you go in with something else and you come out with diabetes and you're like, what?
Yeah.
What just happened?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you guys have any favorite things about National Diabetes Week in Australia? Is there anything that you look forward to, or do you guys participate in any kind of activities? I know, Ashley, you were just working at a camp. So is that something that you look forward to because of this week every year? Does it coincide on purpose?
I don't think the camps coincide with school holidays, so I think it was purely by chance that it sort of lined up. But I've actually really been looking forward to National Diabetes Week this year because I got to talk to her and we got to catch up and talk to you. So I think, doing these different little activities to help raise awareness of National Diabetes Week and the campaigns can be quite fun. So,
well, it's not this year's different because they're talking about type 1 and type 2. It's not just very channeled to just scare tactics.
Yeah.
Which is what it has been in the past.
Regarding type 2?
I think there's just a lot around, preventing or delaying the risk of diabetes-related complications. And so as soon as people hear that, they think, losing toes, losing limbs, losing sight, and that can be quite scary for others. So I think this year the theme has been very different and very inclusive of everyone with diabetes, and good call to actions in that, make sure you recognize those symptoms of diabetes so that a person can be diagnosed on time. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And for those of you that forgot, these are the symptoms again. So share them and, help make diagnoses a little bit easier by having people get checked for diabetes. Because that's, when you don't know that you might have it, that's why we all go in for another reason and then come out with diabetes, right? It's like, I don't know if it would change because we can't change the past, obviously, but like going back and, thinking about, maybe if this were plastered all over the place for a week, it might make people think more about it, right? And be just more aware for when they might encounter it. And, when diagnoses grow, it means that we're more aware of it as a society, I think. So I think that's a good thing. Great. Well, guys, I'm so glad you could join us tonight. We had some really good comments that I'll show one more time from some of our audience members, which is so great. We've got a lot of people who support us out there, including Fred, who came on earlier and waved. So that's awesome.
Hi, Glenn. Fred, sorry.
We'll wave back to you. Guys, is there anything else about National Diabetes Week that you want to share before we wrap up?
I think just get the awareness out there of the 4 Ts. Make sure you know what the 4 Ts are. First, thin, thinnest, thinner, toilet, and tiredness.
You got them. You got them all right. Guys. Great, you guys. Well, listen, I'm so glad that you could join us. And Lou, thank you so much for being a part of this broadcast tonight. We're so glad to meet you and have you on. I really hope that you can come on again and do another Minisode chat with us. So we'll have to brainstorm and come up with some awesome topics to talk about. Ashley, tell Rosie the cat we say hello. I hope that one day she can come join us.
She's around.
She's probably just shy, she's camera shy.
She's very camera shy.
Yeah. Great. Well, guys, have a good rest of your day. And I'm so glad, once again, that you could join us. And everybody who's watching, don't forget to leave your questions or comments on this live video, and we will be quick to respond.
All right. So thank you. Thanks, Katie.